Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. It was supposed to be a simple toast. The restaurant hummed with warm chatter, candlelight softening every corner. Friends leaning in with the kind of smiles you save for engagement dinners. Our glasses were already raised when someone asked the playful question people always ask at nights like that. Do you ever miss the life you had before you met him? Emma didn't hesitate. She tilted her head, let the laughter around the table swell, and said, clear enough for the waiter to hear, I will never love him like I loved my ex. She smiled as if she'd tossed a party trick. Then she added, sometimes I regret leaving Mark for this. But it is what it is, right? The table froze. Silverware went quiet. A couple of our friends tried on weak smiles, the kind you wear when you're not sure whether to laugh or apologize. I didn't do either. I set my glass down so gently it didn't make a sound. The candles burned, the music played, and my heart stepped out of the room to stand on a sidewalk somewhere where cold air could be honest. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't rescue her with a joke. I watched the soft flinch travel through every face and then disappear under politeness. When the server returned, I thanked him for the refills as if nothing in the world had changed. Inside me, everything had. On the walk home, she linked her arm through mine like always and chattered about the flowers for the ceremony, the playlist, the cousin who RSVP'd at the last minute. I said little. Night wind pushed traffic noise down the block. Above us, apartment windows glowed, each one a small life getting on with itself. In our living room, she kicked off her heels and threw herself across the couch. You were quiet, she said, half curious, half careless. Did I say something wrong? I shrugged out of my jacket and hung it carefully, as if it mattered. You said something true, I answered. She blinked, searching for offense. Finding none, she let it go. She never did like lingering where a mirror might be hiding. I made tea. She scrolled her phone. Every few seconds, a half smile crossed her lips, the kind you give a message you've been waiting for. I stared at the steam rising from my mug until it became a slow silver ribbon. When she finally wandered to bed without saying goodnight, I sat a little longer and listened to the house exhale. I rehearsed the different futures that might follow from one sentence and chose the one where I didn't have to explain why I deserved respect. At dawn, I opened my laptop and our wedding spreadsheet, a quiet city of cells and tabs we had built together. Venues, deposits, timelines, seating charts. A dozen emails flagged urgent. I started writing messages. Good morning. Due to a change in circumstances, we'll be canceling our booking. Thank you for your kindness and professionalism. I clicked send the way you close a door softly when someone is sleeping on the other side. By lunchtime, the florist had replied with a sympathetic note and half the retainer back. The photographer sent a polite wish for healing and clarity and kept nothing he wasn't owed. The caterer asked for 30 minutes on the phone. I gave them 10 and a sincere thanks. The venue manager sounded disappointed but not surprised. Weddings, he told me, collapse under smaller truths every week. I wrote to my parents next, then hers. My mother called within minutes. She didn't ask what Emma had said. She only asked if I was safe. I said yes, and for the first time in months, I meant it. Emma left late that morning, claiming last-minute fittings with her bridesmaids. I forwarded the final confirmations while she was gone, copied her on nothing, and printed the refund receipts. The ring, heavy and bright on the coffee table, looked like a promise someone else had made. She came back humming, a shopping bag dangling from her wrist, a little glitter still clinging to her cheekbone. We have to finalize the seating, she sang from the doorway. Already halfway into another conversation. The wedding's off, I said, not loud, not dramatic, just placing the sentence on the table where the ring used to be. I canceled everything this morning. Silence took the room by the shoulders. She stared at me, blinked once, twice. That's not funny. It isn't, I said. I pushed the folder toward her, the receipts, the final emails, the ledger of a different life. You'll find it's thorough. Her laugh arrived late and brittle. You're overreacting, I was being honest. Isn't that what you always want, honesty? Honesty doesn't arrive wrapped in mockery at a table full of people who love us, I said. Honesty looks me in the eye at home. Honesty chooses the right room. She sank into a chair as if gravity had doubled. For a long time, neither of us spoke. When she did, her voice was softer, angrier. You can't do this over one remark. It wasn't one remark, I said, and wished for her sake it had been. It was a pattern dressed as charm. You keep a door open to a past you claim is closed, and expect me to pretend there isn't a draft. She reached for the ring. Her fingers hovered, then withdrew, as if it might burn. You're punishing me for not loving you like I loved him. I'm refusing to marry someone who tells the world I'm second place, I said. Those are different verbs. The doorbell rang that afternoon, and fate, bored, decided to entertain itself. Mark stood on our stoop in a crisp jacket and a smile that wanted to look accidental. He had brought a book I lent him years ago at a party none of us remembered clearly. Emma went pale the way a light fails when a fuse decides it has given enough. I invited him in because sometimes the cleanest story arrives with everyone on stage. We made small talk that abridged a decade. He mentioned he'd heard about our engagement from a friend of a friend. Emma fussed with imaginary dust on the mantel. When he left, I watched him walk down the steps and turn the corner. A shadow I understood better now that it wasn't wearing my face. Emma stayed very still. That was weird, she said finally, aiming for casual and missing by a block. Was it? I asked. Or was it a dress rehearsal talking to its favorite memory? She stood. If you cancel this wedding, you'll regret it. If I don't, I said, I will. For the next 2 days, she performed a version of care. Breakfasts she had never cooked. Lists she wanted us to go through together. Apologies that took the shape of weather reports. Heavy on conditions, light on responsibility. I kept my responses as gentle as I could without erasing the truth. When we're young, we think love means absorbing someone's sharpest edges until we're bleeding too. I had found a different definition out of necessity. Love doesn't require you to become the softest place for cruelty to land. Her mother called and asked if we could talk. We met at a cafe near the park where we had taken our engagement photos. She stirred her tea until the spoon had nothing left to do and said she cared about both of us. I said I knew. She asked what had happened. I repeated the sentence Emma had offered our friends and added nothing else. After a while, her mother nodded, resigned in the way people are when they recognize a door and remember where it leads. At work, I said nothing. I did my job with the peace of someone whose calendar has suddenly emptied of an event, sucking up half his oxygen. In the evenings, I ran along the river until my lungs understood that air wasn't a negotiation. It was a right. I slept in the guest room. She sent me a text from the other side of the wall asking if we could reset. I typed, deleted, typed again, and then put the phone face down. Some kindnesses look like answers but are actually delays. On the third night, she tried anger. You're doing this to prove a point, she said, blocking the hallway as if my decision were a body she could hold back. You like being the stoic hero in this story. I don't like any of this, I said, but I like who I become when I lie to myself even less. She folded her arms. So that's it? You're just done? I was done the moment you chose applause over respect, I said. I'm just catching up to the paperwork. She went out that night. When she came back, a perfume I didn't recognize walked in before she did. She paused in the entry, as if deciding which script to read from. I went to my room and closed the door with the gentleness I wished we'd given each other months ago. The messages started the next morning, little tremors from our circle. Heard a rumor. Everything okay? My answer was the same to all of them. We've decided not to move forward. Thanks for understanding. When pushed, I didn't push back. I didn't offer quotes. Truth doesn't need press. On Friday, a friend of hers posted an old photo of the three of us, back when we were learning how to be different people and faking it badly. I stared at it longer than I meant to, remembering a version of me that still thought he could outwork insecurity with patience. That man was kind. He also didn't know what to do with cruelty that arrived smiling. By Sunday, I had a list taped inside a folder: keys, utilities, storage, mail, last month's rent. I looked around the apartment and made notes on what was mine, what was hers, what belonged to neither and therefore to history. I boxed books she never liked and kept the plant she had forgotten to water, not out of spite, but a sudden practical affection. The plant didn't know anything except where the light was. I decided to learn from it. When the landlord confirmed a smaller unit would open the following week, I nodded to no one and felt the floor tilt toward a different horizon. I told Emma I'd be moving. She stared at me over the rim of her mug, eyes searching for a loophole in a contract I no longer recognized. "So that's really it," she said. "That's really it," I answered. "You will be happier with an audience. I will be happier without one." She looked like she might throw the mug or cry into it. She did neither. "What will you tell people?" she asked. "The truth they can carry," I said. "That we were not right for the way honesty works." The next morning, I carried 2 boxes to the car before work. The city was just waking up, a pale sky stretching itself awake between buildings. A neighbor asked if we were moving. I said I was. She said she was sorry. I said I wasn't. Inside, Emma was standing at the window, hair in a knot she wore when she wanted to look effortless. "Mark texted," she said suddenly, as if offering a match to a room full of water. "He wanted to check on me." "Tell him you're available," I said, not unkindly. "Tell him you always were." She flinched. For a second, the version of her I had loved looked back at me, the one who could be gentle without performing it. Then it was gone. I drove to work with the ring in the glove compartment and the skyline in the rear view, both shining in ways that made leaving feel less like loss and more like gravity doing its job. Around noon, the venue emailed to say they'd donated our deposit to their in-house fund for couples who needed help. I smiled at my screen, how fitting that our ending could begin someone else's kindness. That night, I packed the last box labeled kitchen and left the living room lamp on for her. I wrote a note. "Please be well." It felt small and also like the heaviest sentence I had ever written. When I closed the door behind me, the hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and beginnings. The elevator arrived with a sigh. As it descended, my phone buzzed. A message from a mutual friend, I heard. "Are you okay?" I typed back, "Yes." Then, because it was finally true, I put the phone away and looked at my reflection in the stainless steel. I didn't look heroic or broken. I looked like a man who had chosen a life where his silence belonged to him. The revenge part hadn't arrived yet. I didn't know there would be a stage involved or a room that would stand for me while she sat very still. All I knew was this. I had refused to marry someone who told the world I was a runner-up in my own life. Sometimes that refusal is the only ceremony you need. The apartment looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. After I canceled the wedding, the silence between us grew into something alive, something that moved through every corner like smoke that refused to clear. She still tried to talk to me, still brought up colors for the reception or guest lists, but her words hit walls I no longer had the energy to climb. I had already walked out in my heart. My body was just catching up. The fallout began sooner than I thought. News travels fast in our circles, and when vendors started sending back deposits, questions reached our friends and families. Some of her bridesmaids texted me, confused, asking if there had been a mistake. My mother called to make sure I was steady. Her father emailed me once, short and cold, "We'll talk when you're ready." I didn't reply. I didn't need to explain myself. The truth had already spoken in front of 10 people at that dinner table, and it didn't require a second performance. She, however, scrambled. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen, eyes rimmed red, her hands gripping the counter. "You're overreacting," she insisted, her voice shaking between anger and desperation. I was being honest. Isn't honesty better than lies? Honesty isn't what you said, I told her quietly. Honesty is saying it to me first, not announcing it like a party trick. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Deep down, she knew I was right. Over the next week, she tried everything. She cooked meals she never cared to make before. She wore the perfume I once said I liked. She even dug out the old board games we'd played back when things were light between us. But each gesture felt hollow, like she was performing a role, not sharing herself. Love doesn't need costumes. It shows up bare, without rehearsal. I'd learned that too late, but at least I'd learned. The breaking point came one night when she snapped. "So what? You're just going to walk away? Throw everything we've built into the trash because of one comment?" "One comment that told me everything," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to leave her silent. That weekend, I began moving my things out. Slowly at first, just a few boxes stacked neatly near the door. She watched me, first with disbelief, then with panic. She called her mother, her sister, her closest friends. spinning the story into something where she was the victim of my coldness, my silence. But whispers only go so far when people had sat at that dinner and heard her words themselves. A few days later, I ran into Mark, her ex, the man whose ghost had been sitting between us all along. It happened by accident, or maybe by the kind of coincidence that feels too sharp to be chance. He was at a cafe near my office, laughing with someone at the counter. When he saw me, the smile faltered. He hesitated, then approached, awkward but curious. "I heard the wedding's off," he said carefully. I nodded. "You heard right." He shifted, uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't mean to cause trouble. Emma." She reached out a few times, but I never encouraged it. That told me more than he realized. She hadn't just been holding on to a memory, she had been testing the door, making sure it still opened. I didn't tell him I already knew. I just said, "Then maybe you should stop answering," and walked out. When I got home that night, I found her waiting, her phone on the table, her face pale. She must have guessed I'd run into him. "It's not what you think," she said before I even opened my mouth. I almost laughed at the predictability of it. "It never is it?" She flinched like I'd struck her. "I don't want him. I want you." "You want?" "Both," I said. "But I'm not someone's safety net. I'm not your backup plan." Her tears came then, real and heavy, but they didn't move me. Tears don't erase truth. The days stretched into weeks. Friends who once looked at us as an unshakable couple now avoided choosing sides, though I could see in their eyes they already had. My family rallied quietly around me, offering support without pity. Hers, I heard, was divided. Her father furious, her mother pleading with her to fix things, her sister distant. The world she thought she controlled was slipping, and no amount of charm could stitch it back together. Through it all, I kept my silence. I didn't post cryptic quotes online, didn't air dirty laundry to mutual friends, didn't shout my pain into rooms that didn't deserve it. I just lived. Work, gym, books, small dinners with people I trusted. And the quieter I became, the louder the truth sounded on its own. Then came the night of her final attempt. She asked me to meet her at the park where I had proposed months earlier, under the same oak tree, where I had once knelt with a ring and hoped that feels foolish now. She stood there with a bouquet of lilies, my favorite, her face soft with rehearsed sorrow. "I made a mistake," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared, confused. I thought being honest would make things better. Please, don't throw us away." I looked at her for a long time. The tree above us was bare now, the season having stripped it of its leaves. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "You already did." Her face crumpled. "So that's it?" "That's it," I answered. I walked away, the crunch of leaves underfoot sealing the moment like punctuation. She didn't follow. The wedding was canceled, the relationship dissolved, but the story wasn't finished. Because what happened next wasn't silence, it was transformation. And when she finally saw who I became without her, it left her more speechless than I had ever been at that dinner table. Months passed after the canceled wedding, and life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. At first there were whispers, awkward silences at gatherings, the occasional message from people trying to piece together the story. I kept my answers short. It wasn't right and I couldn't ignore that. That was all anyone needed to know. Emma, on the other hand, spiraled. Friends told me she tried to explain it away, claiming I had overreacted, that it was just a slip. But those who had been at that dinner remembered her exact words, the way she said them with a half smile that cut deeper than any scream could. Lies don't hold up when the truth has witnesses. Slowly, her defenses crumbled. Meanwhile, I found myself growing stronger. I poured energy into work, into fitness, into the small passions I had set aside while planning a future that no longer existed. Colleagues noticed. Friends noticed. Even my parents said I seemed lighter, freer. One day my boss asked me to give a talk to a group of new hires about perseverance and handling setbacks. I almost laughed at the irony, but agreed. When I stood in that room, telling them about resilience, not naming her, not mentioning betrayal directly, just the lesson of rebuilding when life takes something you thought was permanent, I saw the way they leaned forward, listening. When I finished, the applause was soft but genuine. For the first time, I realized my story wasn't just survival. It was something others could learn from. Opportunities snowballed from there. Local groups invited me to speak. Articles were written about finding strength after heartbreak. Slowly, I became known not as the man who got left behind, but as the man who refused to stay broken. And then came the night everything came full circle. I had been invited to give a keynote at a large event downtown, hundreds of people filling the hall. As I walked onto the stage, adjusting the microphone, I scanned the crowd and froze for half a second. She was there. Emma. Sitting near the middle, her face pale, her eyes wide. I didn't let it shake me. Instead, I told my story the way I always did. About silence as power. About walking away when respect is gone. About choosing yourself when someone else makes you feel like second place. The audience responded with thunderous applause, rising to their feet as I finished. And in that sea of standing faces, she remained seated, frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. For the first time, the roles were reversed. I was the one being celebrated, and she was the one unable to speak. That was the revenge no one saw coming. Not anger, not bitterness, but transformation. She thought she had diminished me. Instead, she had created a version of me she could never reach again. I walked off the stage without looking back. I didn't need to. The silence she sat in was louder than any words she could have said.